So I want to talk in the first of a series of brief videos about how to approach the comparative section. I know a lot of students um, are worried about this section. They don't really understand the process. So this is a really short video in which I start by looking at what the process I would apply when looking at this section. Okay, so the first thing I suppose you need to know is that there are three modes this year. They are general vision of viewpoint, theme and issue, and literary genre. In this little video, I'll just very briefly explain again what general vision of viewpoint is, and that all three modes will be examined this year. So there will be 2 questions on each mode. Okay, so you're going to have lots of choice. So I'm going to talk now about how to write a comparative essay, and just walk through the steps really quickly. A lot of students find it difficult to study for English, so hopefully this process might help. So as I say here, the first step is always to look at past examination questions. So go to, I'm going to do that with you now here, but go to, last year's exam. Both general vision of viewpoint and literary genre were on last year. Go to the year before and you'll see questions that are relevant to your exam. Okay, so look at past examination questions and just always remember, in every section on your English paper 1 and 2, there's choice. So there's a skill to picking the question that suits you. And as I'm constantly saying to those of you who are in my classes, whether it be full-time or part-time, as I'm constantly saying to you, that ability to pick the right question is key. Don't, for example, pick the poet, pick the question. In the same way here, don't pick the mode, pick the question. What do I mean by that? You might look at general vision of viewpoint as being a mode that you don't really love, and you might prefer theme and issue because teachers done a really good job preparing that with you. But then you could look at a question on theme and issue, or 2 questions, and just not see why they're relevant to your texts, or they don't really work with the way you've prepared. Then you could look at a vision of viewpoint question. You might go, oh, actually, do you know something? That wording of that question works really well with my prepared material. So I think it's a good step just to look at pairs of questions, or even, pairs within sections. So 2 general vision of viewpoint questions, 2 theme and issue questions, and thinking which one of those would suit me most. Okay. Once you start that process of thinking, you're getting into the kind of mindset you need to develop over the course of the coming months. Don't forget, we're now into the 5-month countdown. January, February, March, April, May, hello exam. So you really have to get a process going. And like anything else in life, I can't think of an example where this doesn't apply. Practice improves quality if you have a methodology to follow. And that's what I'm going to go through here now. Most students don't have a methodology, so they're writing in the dark, if you like. They're writing in hope rather than in expectation, because they don't really understand a process. So a process is very important. And I'm going to go through the steps that I use now. So, you have to know how you're going to start, how you're going to develop, how you're going to conclude. For me, the start has to be your thesis. Okay, your thesis is, where do I stand on the statement in the question in relation to my texts? Then the most important part is, how do you develop out your points? How many points are you going to make? 3? 2 is too few. 3 is often enough. 4 is nice. And when you're developing out those points, how are you going to do that? What's the process for developing out those points? And then, how do you conclude? A leaving cert, any piece of writing, I hesitated there because I was going to say leaving cert, but any piece of writing requires structure. It requires a beginning, a middle, and an end. BME. And I think that's very important that you think about that. So when you've looked at questions and you picked a question, you then have to go to your texts. Now, there's work I can do for you and with you, and there's work that you have to do yourself. You have to know your material. That's the key. The key is you must know your material. Now, as you know, those of you who are in my classes, I've given you notes on 27 of the comparative text now at this stage. I think there's a few more to go. That'll be going up on for those of you who are in my classes on Moodle. But 27 texts. And while none of those documents is absolutely comprehensive and contains everything you could know, every one of those documents contains all that you need to know in terms of answering these questions. I'd stand over being able to use those documents in order to answer any questions, okay? Now, don't forget, if you are not in my classes and you want access to those documents, just drop me an email. I'll talk about the email address in a moment, okay? So you must, when you're writing these essays, be writing from a point of view of being informed. That means knowing your material. And then you got to try and use your RIC skills to write effective paragraphs. And that means writing in a way which is relevant, informed, clear, and in which you contextualize your point. In the comparative, it also means, really importantly, that you're writing in the comparative spirit. That's what the examiner's looking for from you. So that you're not writing about one text at length before then, moving on to the next text without any link between them, that you're constantly comparing and contrasting. There's a spirit of contrast and comparison throughout the paragraphs, throughout the whole essay. And that means including, everybody knows the comparative terminology. The comparative terminology, this is like, this contrasts with, and so on and so forth. So you need to have those links within your paragraphs. Again, I'll show you how to do that in subsequent videos. This is kind of like just an overview now. Okay? Now, as I said, if you cannot support your points with evidence, then you're snookered. So getting access to those documents, accessing those documents I've given you is very important. Now, if you don't need those documents because teachers done a good job in school, brilliant. Like that's what we want. This is just trying to help. But if you don't really understand your comparative text or you haven't identified the key words, just email me at pmcbrunner@icloud. That is it, isn't it? pmcbrunner@icloud. That is it. And we'll organise for you to get access to the documents pertinent to your particular comparative texts. So you need to have your key moments ready, and it is better if you have quotation as well as key moments. Okay? An essay which is supported by definite reference in terms of quotation is always going to be better than an essay of equal quality in terms of structure and expression, which is not supported by quotation. There's a sense that you've worked harder, and that sense is certainly something which would make me reward a student if they know their quotation, and maybe make me reluctant to give top grades to an essay which might be very good but doesn't have that kind of evidence of work. Then we know it's so important to contextualize your points. Don't just tell me that whatever key moment impacted on your sense of the general vision and viewpoint, or gave you a new insight into this theme or issue, or is an important feature of literary genre, but explain why. And that's where students really do fall down when you're writing comparative essays. There really is this sense of you don't really know how to do it. So for me, the A-B structure, again, those of you who are in my classes will be familiar with this, is important. Essentially what it means is whatever point you're developing, you develop it out in two interconnected paragraphs. First one built around a topic sentence with evidence and reference to the question. The second one where you offer your analysis. But I'm going to just really break down that structure now a little bit more clearly. So within your paragraphs, the problem with writing comparative essays is the paragraphs can get really, really long because you're trying to fit in so much information. So just try and manage that by working within a structure inside the paragraph. So you're going to write A and B structure. Again, if you're not sure what that means and you haven't been in my classes to see that, well then I will show you, if not in this video, but in the subsequent videos that you'll see posted on this topic in the coming weeks and months. But part A, you need to give your section, your paragraph, your pair of paragraphs, a clear identity with a topic sentence. Okay, that's part A. Then you go and you present your evidence from text 1. Then you use a link. This reminds me of, this contrasts with, this is reminiscent of, this is not unlike, into text 2. Give your key moment and refer to the question. I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by that process in a moment, okay? Then move to part B. present your evidence from your third text if you're going to include your third text. And don't forget, this year you don't have to refer to 3 texts. 2 will do, and you won't be punished if you only deal with 2, so that's fine. And then in that second paragraph of the section, part B, give your contextualization. So remember, I've said so many times, don't just give lip service. Don't say this influenced my sense of the general vision of viewpoint. Don't say this is an important aspect of the literary genre which enhances the quality of storytelling. Don't say that this moment offered me an insight into my theme. Explain why and how and in what way. That's crucial. When you have done that, then you reread your feckin' work, lads. Reread your work. Like, you want to make sure that your work is as good as you can make it. And checking for basic stuff, punctuation, spelling, syntax, clarity of expression. That stuff matters. Opening quotation marks, closing quotation marks, the correct use of the apostrophe. That stuff matters if you're aiming to score well. This is English, higher level English. If you don't think that stuff matters in your real life, that's fine. But in this exam, it matters. So pay attention and reread. In terms of study, picking a question, thinking about key moments, planning it out, I think that's study. I think you could do that. That's a way of starting to think about this process. Maybe in your study timetable, give a 20-minute slot for English on a Tuesday, just to do that. Just look at a pair of questions or 4 questions from 2 different modes. Pick the one that you think would work best for you, and then see if you can follow the plan of just saying, okay, these are the key moments I would use and refer to. And then maybe on Thursday, spend 10 minutes trying to write the paragraph or pair of paragraphs and review them. So instead of looking at, oh God, I have to write a full comparative essay, it's going to take me ages to do it. Building blocks are important. And if you can just get into the habit of practicing writing effective paragraphs or pairs of paragraphs in the A and B structure, it will make the writing of the full-length essays when that comes much easier. So for me, how do you study? You don't study passively. You study actively with a pen in your hand. I'm looking for a pen here. I should have one handy. With a pen in your hand. That's the question I'm going to do. Have your notes, open book always. Have your notes out on the table in front of you. Those are the 2 key moments I'm going to use. Now I'm going to practice writing the paragraph in the way that Paul showed me, or indeed whatever process your teacher has taught you. I'm sure there's lots of different processes that you're being taught. In your comparative essays, you don't need to be over ambitious in terms of the number of points you're going to make. 3 or 4 good points really will give you a good essay. If you think about an opening paragraph, if you're going to write one, don't always need to. A closing paragraph, and then if you develop 4 points following the A and B structure, that's 8, development paragraphs following the RIC rules. You're going to do okay. And then remember, if you are only doing 2 texts, that's fine. But also, if you're making a point that's relevant to 2 texts but not relevant to the third one, you're allowed to do it. That's fine. In fact, you can mention the third one at this point doesn't really apply to the third one, but it does, because that's contrasting with the other 2 in which the point does apply. Okay, so that's the fundamentals of how to go about writing a comparative essay. That's the kind of the plan. Now, when you think about general vision and viewpoint, and I'm gonna finish this video now, and then what I'll do is I'll make another one in which I start. I'll post these up kind of every few days, see if anybody's watching them, and then show you how to use that process to write an essay. This is the starting point. This list here is just a list of things to consider. If you're not sure about general vision and viewpoint and what to look for, look out for how your texts open, conclude, heroic behavior, villainous behavior, cruelty, generosity. Any of those things would function as key moments that would influence whether or not the text presents you or us, readers, viewers, if it's a movie, audience members, if it's a play, with a fundamentally positive or negative or pessimistic or optimistic or hopeful or whatever sense of human existence. Because that's what general vision of viewpoint is. It's the idea, the perception of life and human existence that is presented in a text. I hope that made some sense. Okay, so again, I'm trying to keep these short because I know nobody watches them beyond 5 or 10 minutes. TikTok generation. PMC Brunner at iCloud if you're looking for notes. But keep an eye out for the next video.